Volume 6 C16. Appointing the last round of new nobility took most of the day, and when it was finally done, Queen Kalka rose to her feet. "Empty the damn hall," she said with icy calm. Her radiant beauty, once seen as so very soft and demure, was now likened to a radiant vampire. She then leveled her finger at Remedios Custodio in the corner. "My private council hall, with them. Now." Kalka hissed the command and did not wait for the obedience to which she was entitled. She walked with long strides, her feet clicking over cold stone as Kelet fell in behind her with a very lowered gaze and only a darted look at Remedios to ensure the woman was following orders. That she looked was enough to snap Remedios' head back in dismay as if she had suffered a physical blow, her mouth dropping open. What did I do wrong? She wondered as she left the room, grabbed the two she'd kept under guard just outside the hall, and dragged them stumbling behind her. Their chains were short at wrists and ankles, making long steps all but impossible, but Remedios found no room in her heart to give a damn. If they birthed a traitorous monster, what does that say about who they are? I never did like his eyes anyway. She thought as the pair grunted and pulled back on the grey metal chains to try to buy time to keep up. Fortunately for Naya's mother and father, they did not have far to go. Remedios entered the room beyond the heavy oaken door and yanked the chain so that the pair stumbled in and nearly toppled, avoiding it only because Naya's mother hit the side wall instead. Remedios closed the door and turned to face her queen, only to find, to her dismay, a mask of wrath. "You idiot," Kalka yelled and pointed at the pair that was struggling to rise upright. "Are those who I think they are?" "My queen?" Remedios asked, furrowing her brow. "These are the parents of the traitor, Naya Baraha. They tried to interfere in the execution of the criminal, to help her escape." "They're her parents, you idiot!" Kalka shrieked in outrage. "Of course they tried to save their child's life. How could you be so? I don't even know where to begin." Kalka's voice became exasperated and she flung herself down in the leather seat at the head of the short table and began to rub her forehead. The older couple looked at Kalka with silent questioning faces. They were rough-looking folk, the male of the pair having a threatening expression that Kalka might have taken offense to if not for her foreknowledge of who he was and how he naturally looked. "Undo their chains at once," she commanded, and a stunned Remedios began to fumble through her belt for the set of keys. The human prisoners held their wrists up, but still remained silent. "I'm sorry about your poor treatment. That was never my intention. I ordered that you be brought to me, nothing more," Kalka said, and the couple looked down as their chains fell away. "Well? Your queen has spoken. Aren't you going to say you're grateful?" Remedios demanded. Kelet, however, interjected. "Remedios, shut up," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her sister snapped her mouth closed for a moment while the chains fell away to clatter on the floor. I don't understand." Kalka rubbed her forehead as if her head hurt a great deal. "Lord and Lady Baraha, please, sit." While the couple, who shared a brief glance of uncertainty with one another, obeyed, Kalka could only give out a groan of frustration. "All right, I will help you understand, Remedios," Kalka replied. "First, your trial of the woman, Naya Baraha, was corrupt. I know it. Kelet knows it. Gustav knows it. As it turns out, most people knew those trials couldn't be trusted. Except me for the longest time. You taking her to trial intending to kill her, that is bad enough. It will take years of work to undo the corruption you had a hand in spreading. Majesty, it was all for you." Remedios protested. "I saw the guilty get away with crimes. They got in the way of your Majesty's justice, so she pursed her lips, then finished through gritted teeth, made sure they didn't anymore. You framed our daughter and then tried to kill her." Pabel roared a father's outrage, his features twisted with anger. It was only his wife who held him back, her hand grasping at his wrist before he could leap to attack the paladin. Remedios did not flinch from the accusation. Instead she said, "Your daughter was guilty. She spared a dragon, she spared demi-humans, she spared the enemies of humanity. She had to die. And you failed to kill her," Kalka pointed out with such sharpness that both fell silent. "Now, thanks to you she has become the Queen of Frost, and has united the entire Abelian Hills into the kingdom of Demalbion." Remedios began to tremble, dense as she knew herself to be. A united Abelian Hills was a worst-case scenario. I'm not finished," Kalka hissed. Caught off guard by the Queen's statement, Naya's parents sat mute. Yes. Your daughter is alive. The dragon who took her was the one she saved, but she is changed, Kalka emphasized. A human. In charge of demi-humans. How can this be? Pabel asked while his wife shook her head in denial even while her eyes welled up with contradicting relief. She is no longer completely human. Dragon's blood has changed her, and evidently. Kalka briefly hesitated about whether to say it, given the myriad of ways knowledge came her way, but resolve settled in her heart, and she began to explain to them, and to Remedios, what she knew of the events beyond the wall. The rise of the Frost Queen, her partnership with the dragon, the conquest and consolidation of power might have been vague, but it was like a shadow. They knew the shape and outline, if not the details of the events as they happened. Remedios turned white as a sheet. And that brings us to the envoy, Kalka snapped. Aye. Remedios began to repeat. Remedios. Shut up, Kelit rebuked her sister while the parents of Nyabaraha sat mute, their mouths opening and closing like fish underwater. The envoy you killed was from a now united Abelian Hills, do you get it? You killed a state envoy, Kelit snapped. The queen put you there so you couldn't cause any more trouble while you recovered. What were you thinking? Kelit yelled at the pale paladin. Remedios put her left hand over her armored chest and leaned forward toward her queen. They were orcs. Demi-human monsters. I was following the law. Demi-humans are to be killed on sight. Those are standing orders. It was a marked envoy, identified as such and allowed through our gates. It contained an offer of peace. By killing them, you may have dragged us into a war with the entire demi-human population. Kalka rested her hands one over the other on the table, her fingernails dug into the wood hard enough to scratch it. Do you have no sense whatsoever? How could you think I would have encouraged you to do that? I could have had them killed myself if I wanted. You should have sent them on their way, maybe with an escort, but still. You don't kill messengers, Kalka snapped. Remedios' hand fell away and her head bowed. I'm sorry. I just did what I thought you would have wanted. Demi-humans are evil. Traitors are evil. Kalka ignored the apology. The Queen of Frost sent word that she would not be satisfied by anything less than putting your head on a spike on the wall where she could see it. She stated that if I refused, we would have a war on our hands. Now tell me, Remedios. Can we win? Can we win against the entire Abelian Hills, led by the Huntress of the Wilds who knows our country like the back of her hand? Remedios opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Then opened it again. My queen, I was only trying. Can we win? Kalka screamed at the paladin, and Remedio became utterly still. I don't know. She replied, I'm sorry. Kalka pursed her lips and spoke in a soft, icy voice. I sent Gustav to negotiate with her, offering to have you whipped to within an inch of your life and stripped of all your honors, status, and position instead. If the gods are willing, I can save your life. Remedios' head snapped up. My queen. Kalka's small fist pounded on the table, rattling it from one end to the other. This is for all your past service and devotion, but it's also because if I give you up, I might as well abdicate right now. I can't just kill my own people on the orders of a foreigner or a. I don't even know if I can call her a traitor. Not after everything. Is that why we are here, Your Majesty? Pabel asked and put his arm around his wife to draw her closer to himself. To be hostages against our child? Or are we to be simply killed? If we're hostages so that you can finally kill her, you might as well kill us both now. We'll never cooperate. Not with that. The soft-voiced defiance of the mother of the Queen of Frost offered no hint of compromise, and at last Kalka relaxed, at least a little. Hostages. Maybe. If it will work, if I can spare my people by trading you to her. I'm sorry, but yes, I will do that. I don't want a war, I hate war. Queen Kalka said with disgust that twisted her mouth as if she were about to retch for a moment. But for now you can consider that you're here for your own safety. It won't be long before Gustav either succeeds or fails, maybe he already has, and when he does, it won't be long before people know who the invader is, assuming she attacks. What will be done to you then? Kalka asked the question rhetorically, but their drawn faces showed they understood her meaning. Someone would kill them just for being Naya's parents. Besides, I can't be sure you won't betray us to her. I can't kill you, I can't punish you, I can't let you go, and you have some use alive. Kalka snorted, it's a problem. One I can only solve by confining you here in Hobans for now. I'll see that you're well treated, and if things end well with your daughter, perhaps I can send you to her. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. I'm sorry. I truly am. Queen Kalka said, closing her bright and fury-filled eyes. Pabel set his jaw and clung to his wife just a little more tightly. We were loyal. This is our reward? No, Kalka said, her eyes welling up. Are you going to force me to say it? The elder of the Barahas remained quiet. This is how it has to be. Kalka finally answered with a half shout. I don't want things to be this way. I just wanted a just kingdom of happy subjects where nobody would cry. But this. She shot to her feet and slapped her hands down on the table. This is what I have. It isn't fair. It isn't right. But it is how things are for now at least. After it's over. If I'm alive, if we all are, I will make things as right as I can. You have my word, Kalka said and raised her arm to be level with Remedios. And you are confined to your quarters in this palace until I call for you again. If you want to make up for what you've done, if the Queen of Frost does come into our lands, you had better be prepared to die fighting to protect our people. Because a lot of them are going to die first to protect you entirely because of you. Now get out. Kalka snarled the words out, and with Remedios' heart swelling with outrage and shame in equal measure, the disgraced paladin slunk out of the door. Kelet. Provide suitable quarters for the Barahos, set them under gentle guard. And get them a change of clothes, Kalka said with a calmer air, and unable to think of anything more to add. Kelet, who felt the rebuke of her sister as if it had been on her as well, could only say, if you two would please come with me. And then headed for the door on slow steps that allowed time for the couple, lost in their own thoughts about the course their child's life now took, to follow on slow and heavy steps. Thus leaving Queen Kalka alone with her thoughts at last. Volume 6 C17. Gustav's heart was tight in his chest, he could barely breathe, the eyes, those narrow, vicious eyes so filled with fury, the same as the day he let her be lashed to the post to die. I couldn't tell her, I still hear her scream at night. I couldn't talk her down. Maybe I didn't have a right to. Maybe this is what we get? Maybe this is divine retribution for our corruption. If it is fitting. I'd have offered my own life if I thought it would do any good. And yet he was afraid to die, and though he told himself he would have done it, he could have anyway and hadn't. Don't blame yourself, only a mad fool offers their life on the mere hope that it may possibly save someone else. He shook his head from atop his mount. He was days away from the wall and on his side of it again, making him safe. And yet the chill still swept over him as if those eyes were lingering on the back of his head. Next time I meet her, I have to try to kill her. That was an ugly thought. Could I? He wondered. The Huntress of the Wilds had the greatest senses in the Holy Kingdom. Rumor had it that she knew danger was coming from so far away that she had time to prepare 100 traps before her prey came within 100 yards. Her former skills as an archer. She was also the only one who could imbue her arrows with mana, making her uniquely deadly at a great distance. And that was before her metamorphosis. Gustav gulped. Before her present state, he was confident he could have beaten her up close, but now? There was no way to know. He looked round him on the road, seeking answers among the autumn blooms of the trees. While most plants began to die in autumn, a handful had one final bloom. Fruit trees and flowers that would fall to the ground the day before the first snow. The flowers would provide the bedding of the fruit, the snow would cover both, providing water, and when the snow melted the fruit would sink into the mud, the fruit would shrivel into a fertile seed, and a new tree would begin to grow. Countless poets had written about it over the years, though Gustav never paid much mind to poetry. It was something he liked at least, like a last defiance of the winter before it came. His horse clip-clopped along the road and Gustav saw no reason to hurry it at the present. A messenger would have already raced ahead to Her Majesty, and he had no desire to face her, or Kelet, or Remedios. What about the south? The issues there are ongoing. Will they support us if we are invaded? It was hard to imagine that they wouldn't. The demi-humans were always the traditional enemies of humanity. Whatever happens now, it's out of my hands. All the world's a stage, and as for my part, whatever happens, I think I must have played mine very poorly. Gustav weighed and measured his character, found it wanting, and recalled the words of the peasant whore who mocked him the night after the trial, who taunted him about her role in its corruption by simply playing with the nobles. She may very well have just brought us all down. One peasant. No. I can't hold it all on her. I did nothing. One judge. One peasant. One paladin fool. It doesn't take much to bring down a kingdom, does it? He acknowledged the truth of the rhetorical question, and her following words about. What was it? If the side you want to join doesn't exist, make it? Or something like that, wasn't it? He couldn't clearly recall her words, but taunting as it might have been. Even if he remembered it wrongly, that was the gist, and she had a point. His eyes leveled ahead of himself, and he patiently began to contemplate what kind of side that might really be, and wonder if it could truly be done. Duke Astraka stood in the path of the door while the prince looked at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. You want to overthrow my sister? No, but she left us little choice. Do you know how many of our people died in the capital because of her? Then she demands more taxes from us on top of it? Absolutely not. When Mark was destroyed, the elves rose in rebellion, and yet she has sent nobody to put them down. She sent tax collectors but no support. The South does not want to defend the North any longer, he said with a quiet calm. If the gods wills it, Astraka folded his hands behind his back and inclined his head, she will simply abdicate and acknowledge you as the rightful holy king. You will then be released to take your place, on condition that you grant us immediate independence. You don't want to defend the North? The North defends you, you blistering idiot. Caspond blasted back. What will you do about the demi-humans if they come through the North? Caspond demanded to know, and contrary to his expectation, Duke Astraka simply shrugged. Trade with them, I suppose. I lost more of my family to humans than I ever did to demi-humans. I've already spoken with the Frost Queen, and she is really quite reasonable. Astraka pointed out, and then went quiet, allowing that to sink in. Traitor. You were supposed to bring me south to ensure my safety, Caspond bellowed and tried to shoot to his feet, but the magic chair would not allow him to move. And safe you shall be, Astraka said and gestured with one large meaty hand to the luxuriously appointed quarters. Right here in the tower. Under constant guard. You have a fine bed, will be fed according to your station, provided a servant, even bedmates if you want them. Boy or girl, we're not fussy about that kind of thing here in the South. But you will have to wait while we deal with the issue of your sister. After that, he waved toward the door, we will let you go, and if you want to make war on us, remember. It wasn't the South that betrayed the Frost Queen. She will make an excellent ally against any northern aggression for however long dragonids live at the very least. Bastard, Caspond bellowed and kicked and flailed hopelessly in the chair which held him fast. Don't bother trying to get out of the chair, it won't let you up until I close that door from the other side. After that, you're free to move around and I will send attendants to you. Astraka promised and folded his hands behind his back again. Caspond relaxed and narrowed his eyes. Do you really expect to get away with this? Duke Astraka seemed to contemplate that for several long seconds, searching Caspond's eyes for something only he might see, before at last he answered. You never get away with things you don't even try to do, Prince Caspond. And this is something I have to try. Good night. Duke Astraka remarked and left the room, closing and locking the door behind him, ending the magic that held the prince stuck and allowing him to stand up again. Volume 6 C18. Ileana woke up with the peasant girl clinging to her. The soft feel of steady breathing caressed the elf's sensitive ears, causing the nearest one to flick about periodically. Despite waking up, for a long time Ileana simply didn't move. There was no need, and that felt best of all. The fur was soft and faintly tickled where it touched bare skin, and above in the tree, birds were already starting to chirp. The sun had not yet fully crested on the horizon, that much she could be sure of given that it was still almost pitch black. She glanced out of the corner of her eye to the sleeping human woman and realized something quite unexpected. I didn't have any nightmares last night. What an unexpected thing. It was a wondrous thought, though her more candid reasoning quickly became, at least I don't remember any nightmares. Which is basically the same thing. The human woman must have started to cling to her arm at some point during the night, needy girl. Ileana pondered, though without criticism. After so long together in what remained dangerous work for both of them, though in differing ways, she'd come to realize that for whatever reason, Skarna had an insatiable need, not for sex, though it was often presented as such, but to be near someone. Ileana's blue eye pierced the veil of the dying night with ease, and she reflexively glanced toward the rickety fence she built for her privacy. Her rear flicked about again, no elves breached it. Though she would never tell Skarna, the truth was that their hatred for humans ran much deeper than Ileana wanted to admit. Especially with the Elf King's progeny. What they would do to humans if given the chance. Her own hatred for humans wasn't much less than theirs, but this one at least, she liked. This one at least, was on her side and took risks for her people she hadn't thought any human ever would. So she let the clinging continue and simply lay there, staring up at the canopy of dying green shrouded in shadow that would itself die soon, and waited for the human woman to return to life. And tried to ignore it when the auburn-haired girl began to snore, rather than to wake. How long it would be before they were presented with that absurd magic again and brought to report to Lady Albedo, Ileana had no idea, only that it was close, and so Skarna should, following a particular point, be with her. Given the nature of the Southern Holy Kingdom, that necessitated that Skarna hide among the elves. When she awoke and found Ileana simply stretched out languidly on her back, and herself clinging to the elf, she blinked away the sleep, let go, and immediately shot up. "I'm sorry. I cling in my sleep for some reason," Skarna admitted and inched away. Ileana gave a silvery laugh. "It's fine, I noticed, and you're all right. It's just an arm," and, while still on her back, she raised them up toward the sky, stretching them out. "I've got two. I can spare one for a friend for a few hours." "Hours?" Skarna exclaimed and looked up at the trees overhead. The canopy was so thick only a few bright spots on the ground revealed it was daytime, at least where she was lying. "Yes, hours. Don't worry about it. Nobody is going to do anything today. You're our only link to the outside world, and you're stuck here till we're called back to Lady Albedo," Ileana said and crossed one ankle over the other. "So relax," she said, and then chuckled. "Humans, you're a funny lot. Always in such a damn hurry. Well, things. We have to get things done and all," Skarna pointed out, flushing a little in the face. The elf woman only smirked. "Maybe it's because of our long lives, but we see no reason to rush things that will happen whether we hurry or not. Your race is such a frantic lot that it's a wonder you ever relax over anything." Ileana mocked the woman, but rather than argue, Skarna lay back down beside her. "My mother always said I was lazy. Maybe by human standards, I kind of am. I mean, I will work hard for something I want, but the rest of the time, why stress? But you all make me look industrious." Skarna chuckled a little in a self-effacing way and stretched out. "I will take that as a compliment," Ileana graciously said, and let out a long, slow yawn, one immediately matched by Skarna herself. So they relaxed that way in amiable silence until finally the smell of stew from somewhere close by hit their noses. Their stomachs growled at the same time, and with the same thought, they sat up. Finding the food was easy. A hulking behemoth of an elf whose body was crisscrossed with burns and scars over his bare torso and back, was standing over a large iron pot. Nearby, several smaller elf women were holding their hands out, and a pulsing blue glow was passing from where they crouched, to the pot itself. Skarna looked at the scene, and then up to Ileana. "Cooking without fire. We don't want the smoke to give us away," the elf explained, and Skarna nodded several times. Right, that makes sense," Skarna said before the two took up wooden bowls from a waiting stack and then got into line with the rest of the forest band. "You know, I always heard that elves were vegetarians," Skarna said while the line inched forward. "I guess that story is total shit." Ileana looked over her shoulder and laughed. "Have you had meat? Who in the world wouldn't want it?" She licked her hungry lips, and those elves near enough to have heard Skarna's comment, and Ileana's retort, began to laugh as well. Skarna had the grace to blush. "I'd never even seen an elf before. How was I to know? All I knew was what I heard in my village." She scratched her head. "Wait. Does this also mean that elves don't hate boats and can actually swim after all?" Ileana rolled her eyes. "Yes, we can swim. But no, we don't like boats. We're forest people, we're bound to the earth. A large body of water breaks our connection with it, so we tend to avoid boats. There will probably never be an elf pirate. I can promise you that," Ileana said with a decisive shake of her head that bounced her long golden hair wildly about. "Huh, so you don't actually sink in the water? Go figure." Skarna shrugged, and blushed when several elves face-palmed ahead and behind her. "What? She exclaimed, "I've just never seen elves. All kinds of stories get around. How am I to know the truth unless I ask?" It was fair enough, and brought some rumbling agreement that at least felt more bemused than annoyed, and it prompted Ileana to sigh in exasperation. "That's fair. But still, I can't believe the stuff you human peasants make up. We're not dwarves, those sink when you toss them in the water. Now come on, it's our turn." Ileana stepped forward and held out her bowl. A generous helping of meat and vegetables filled her bowl nearly to the brim. She stepped aside and waited for Skarna. The human woman put on her biggest and friendliest smile for the stone-faced behemoth, and he dipped the ladle into the heaping pot, only to pull up little more than broth. Skarna looked down at it as the watery brown substance filled her bowl like a taunt. "Ah, humans need food too." "Don't care," the cook remarked. "But," Skarna's stomach rumbled, "I'm on your side. I'm helping you." She felt a hand on her shoulder, slender fingers squeezed. "Share mine," Ileana said, and gave a tiny tug that was enough to get Skarna to walk away, though not without a backward glare at the giant of an elf. "I told you," Ileana whispered when she led the human well away from the other elves, "my kind does not like your kind. You are alive only because I know you and I explained everything. Otherwise, they'd have never believed you, let alone let you in." Skarna looked down at her watery bowl, and at the one Ileana held that was heaping with thick chunks of meat and fresh veggies. If she needed proof that Ileana told the truth, that was it. "I'd starve in here if they only gave me broth. They'd really let me starve." To a peasant who knew failed harvests and high taxes, who felt the rumbling of her belly on many a cold night, there was no greater sign of hatred than leaving someone starving, and no greater sign of affection than sharing food. Ileana began plucking chunks of meat and vegetables deftly from her bowl and plopping them bit by bit into Skarna's, expecting a mere piece or two when the broth first splashed at her wrists, but the elf woman did not stop until her little pale fingers were dipped into her bowl and she transferred almost exactly half of the contents of her bowl into that of her companion. Thank you." Skarna stared down at the bowl. Her fingers were now soaked from the overflow of broth, and she set herself against a tree to lower herself to a seated position on the ground. "You do the same for me," Ileana replied with a little smile on her face which Skarna could not see with the bowl tilted up at her face, slurping as much as she could. "You sound awfully sure about that," Skarna finally said, her lips and chin stained with broth. She wiped it with the back of her silk sleeve. "I'm just a spy, a seducer, a liar, and a traitor to a bunch of my own people. You've got no real reason to think I'd do as much for you." Ileana stretched out against the tree. Her own dining was slower. While Skarna shoveled the food into her mouth, Ileana took one bite, one chunk at a time, chewed, and swallowed before finally answering. "I'm pretty sure you would." Any further conversation was killed when the gate opened between them. Volume 6 C19. "So this is what it's like," Naya thought as the world disappeared below her. Those who towered over her became like tiny ants and the world itself seemed to both shrink and grow larger than it had ever been before. The chill of the air could not touch her, the high winds far above the ground below were like a gentle breeze on her skin, and it wasn't until she stopped after passing through a cloud that she wondered, "Why did I just do this? How did I know I could do it?" There was no clear answer to the former squire. She turned her eyes toward the distant wall, far out of view even from where she finally hovered, somewhere beyond, there, where her parents lived. Or at least, I hope they're alive. Would they accept me now? As I am? That was an unpleasant thought. Before my death I finally learned that they actually loved me. What a horrible thing, if they could look at me now and feel only hate. It wasn't a pleasant thought, nor was it an impossible one. They all grew up with the same teachings: non-humans are evil. They must be destroyed or broken so as to never threaten us. They are the enemy. In her darkest moments in the midst of hunting them, Naya believed it too, when they were striving to kill her, or some peasants were fleeing a demi-human raid and required a rescue. Seeing their burned-out homes and bodies. But other times, an orc mother clinging to an infant, begging for her child's life, a father saying he wanted to see his son again. A starving, hungry body that lost its former strength. A dragon who just wanted to live. It taught her how alike they all really were in the end. One side of the wall or the other. Life is life, and we all want to keep it, she thought, and closed her eyes again, picturing the faces of the only humans she loved, or who she now knew, had ever loved her. It sat in her gut like a rock, wondering what reaction they would have if they could see her now. There is only one way to find out. And that is to get them myself. If they're alive. And if they are not. If they are not? Naya wondered, and her fist clenched far tighter than she expected that it would. The severing of her last true tie to her old home, and part of her, a tiny fragment, knew the truth. That thread is the only thing holding them back from slaughter. If they choose to cut it, on their heads be my actions. She then began her slow descent, her wings flapped slow and steady, held out to keep the fall relatively slow and easy, her body spiraling back down to the ground again. She did her best to land beside Sir Dark, though when she hit ground and folded her wings in instinctively, she stumbled a few paces before looking at him with questioning eyes. The instinct of young dragons. To taste the sky. A call to fly, he said to her, though it typically doesn't hurt to open wings for the first time. Naya swallowed and shuddered. That part hurt, but she looked up at the sky. It was worth it. For that. The evening with Albedo was far more intense than Ainz had ever anticipated, and for reasons he did not ever expect to deal with. At least she's fine with me being human, but all she wants is to be with me and I can't. It would be easier if her loathing of humans extended to me. At least then she wouldn't be in any pain. He trailed off the thought, and if he were honest with himself, he only half listened to her. Until she got to the end. And this brings us to the exit strategy. With the kingdom in chaos and at war, I have no doubt that someone as intelligent as the Holy Queen will realize something else is at play here, and to that end, I am arranging for the slain theocracy to take the fall. The doppelgangers are mere summons, so they will be captured and reveal theocracy involvement, with the goal of creating a far more militant kingdom that will take action against the demi-humans of the Abelian Hills and take the majority of the casualties before they interjected and swept over the whole region themselves. Ainz didn't pale. He was too surprised to do even that. You sound certain, he said after a long minute. Why would they believe that the theocracy would take such an action, and what about Wenmark? Your destruction there was far greater than their magic could manage. He pointed out. Albedo's morose face became brighter when she answered, Master, I used falling meteors and a quake. They will think these merely natural events, and that it merely gave the theocracy an opportunity to capitalize on. As he thought about it, she's right. This could work. The slain theocracy is the greatest potential threat to my domain. They accept no other races beyond humanity. I can't let them remain diplomatically strong. He swallowed, but kept the noise to nothing. Why, you did remarkably well, Albedo. I'm very proud of you. I'm sure Tabula would offer all his praise to you. Her face became bitter, twisted. He would offer only trash in my eyes, she spat out, and then lowered her eyes when she saw the open-mouthed shock on her master's face. Forgive me for speaking out of turn of a supreme being, master. She folded her hands onto her lap and kept her eyes downcast. Albedo. Ainz only said her name, almost like it was a prayer. What is it? How could you say that about your father? What can I say about a father who abandoned me? And worse. Abandoned the man I love? Albedo exclaimed with sudden passion, leaning forward across the table. She held her hand over her ample chest, covering where her demonic heart beat. He hurt you by leaving, they all did. You are the only one left. The one who stayed, the last. She paused. Love. Heart. Future. 1,000 words of affection and desire ran through her from the tips of her toes to the top of her head, but unable to bear rejection a second time, she said only, praise is the only treasure I can hope for. Ainz took that in, so much came to mind, but his courage died, his will died, and instead he looked away from her and said, I should meet your subordinates. Are you finished with them here, or have they more to do? They have only one task left. And then they will be fit for their reward. Albedo answered, and opened the gate as Ainz donned his mask and stood from the table. Moments later, a pair of women came rushing through the magic of the gate as if they thought nothing of it, and immediately went down to their knees before Albedo. Welcome back, my servants, Albedo said and put a blessing hand on first the elf, then the human, and then stepped aside to gesture to her master. This is the Lord you serve, All-Father Ainz Gaun, ruler of the Kingdom of Nazarick. She had the brightest of smiles on her face, and spoke with such passion and enthusiasm that neither woman could doubt the demon's words. Both Ileana and Skarna prostrated themselves reflexively, bowing their heads and pressing them down against the floor after they bent at the waist, hands cast forward in submission. "Lord of Our Lady." Ileana was the first to cry out her obeisance. "We are your humble servants." "Raise your heads," Ein said in an off-handed way, and slowly the pair went up to their knees. "By the gods," Skarna thought with dismay, he seemed utterly holy. An aura of divine majesty radiated off of him as if he were a god. Her bright green eyes beheld the Allfather and every fiber of her being cried out for her to beg for his orders. Her body shook with almost religious ecstasy and basked in his presence, and at her side out of the corner of her eye, she could see that Ileana felt the same or nearly. Only such a lord could command Our Lady, Skarna whispered under her breath, and while she wasn't sure if the robed man heard her, it didn't matter, he acknowledged her with a nod. "You were promised rewards for your service, were you not?" Ainz asked, trying to speak with a gentle voice, but their reactions, wide eyes, shaking, over-the-top responses at the very least, either my level 100 charisma is at work, or albedo has told them enough to make them afraid. Which exactly it was, he was unsure and could no longer ask, so he focused on the immediate, and what he could ask. I was promised that I could act as Lady Albedo's personal servant. A secretary in her home, to attend her as my one and only mistress. Ileana replied, stammering all the while, and flushing bright red in the face. "Acceptable." Ainz replied succinctly. "It hadn't occurred to me before, but she doesn't have any truly personal servant to look after her needs. In retrospect I should have thought to assign her a maid or I should see to the same for every guardian with abundant responsibilities outside of their floors alone." "And you?" Ainz glanced from the elf to the human after privately filing that thought away. Skarna's bright red face did not regain its true color. "My wish, it seems so shallow and worthless now." She hung her head, shamed about herself for the first time in her life. I was offered wealth. Lots of it, she said, and she could sense his disappointment in his answer. "You will have it," he replied to her, "as well as a suitable home after this for all your loyalty." Thank you, my lord," Skarna said, but could not raise her head again. He looked away from the kneeling women and over to Albedo. "Begin the last phase of operations. And then send them to Nazarick when you are done." "As my lord commands," Albedo said and bowed in his direction until the gate appeared again and he vanished through it once more.